Well, uh, I last year and had the opportunity now um a just yeah, yeah,
MacBook here. Oh, well, I have it though. I have it connecting. I have it connecting. I mean, let me just ask, Tyler, is this speaker working better for you now? Yes. Okay, well, what I'm gonna do is put this beside Jay and then you'll be able to hear Jay.
We might have to just read questions
Yeah.
from the audience.
Right, or get people to come closer to this. I'm sorry, I tried to get some technology.
That's okay. Um. So.
How do you want to, do you want to keep going, Jay? And then Tyler can hear us now, so he can chime in whenever he wants.
Okay, I'll try to wrap up that explanation. So based off of that, if you can imagine that paradigm in play for what you're doing, how does that change how you think about development? Does it at all? Does it make it more complex or simpler? Anyone?
Big thing that we're looking at with AI is the traceability. So adding all of these different agents, I feel like adds complexity to that traceability.
You think?
So I was wondering how systems like this are able to be audited and see where data is coming from.
That's a fantastic question. Tyler can speak more technically to it, but generally speaking, the traceability comes from the design of the system. And you can build more traceability, more transparency into it. Many companies are choosing not to. But if Tyler does a demo, he'll be able to show you every thought, every criticism, every step taken by every single agent. And it's actually kind of funny to you know, talk to each other. They're very polite. They thank each other for doing good work. So the answer to the question is, if traceability is desired by the people making the system, it can be put in to a large degree. I will ask you this, though. Let's imagine that this here is a multi-agent system, which by design, this is right. You all individuals who all bring special experiences, expertise to literally the table. How much traceability do you have about what everybody else is thinking? How much traceability have you ever had? So that's a question to contemplate when putting expectations on these systems when it's by definition not part of the paradigm now.
Is Tyler going to jump in on this?
Yeah, I think you would for sure.
Can you
yeah.
guys hear me? 'Cause I
Yes.
can't hear a damn thing. Still,
You
but-
can't hear.
Okay, I hear you when you're talking directly into the mic. Jay, I mostly hear what you're saying. I can't hear anyone beyond you two.
Yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't know why that is. I mean,
It's because it's a you're speaking into a laptop and the mic is not very
we
good.
actually have a meeting owl here.
Oh, it's not connect. Maybe check if it's not using it or if it is using it. No, that's just a staticky mess. Crap. This is so much worse than it was before.
Tyler,
Yeah.
what we're gonna do is I
There.
switched back to to my laptop. So when people talk to you, they'll come up to the laptop, but we can hear you fine.
Okay, yeah.
And
Okay.
do you think we see you, or would you rather not be seen?
I'm not. Vision is not the important sense for this.
Okay.
So it might be easiest even for you guys to pass it around if you're not worrying about what's being broadcast on camera. I'm fine if you turn that off if it makes it easier to hear you all.
That's fine. Go ahead.
Can I get a question?
Sure. Well, yeah. Okay. We were talking about traceability, and one of the things that Jay raised was that it's possible with multi-agent systems actually to produce a fair amount of traceability if you design that into the system. Although he asked us the question, how much traceability do you have in a multi-agent conversation around the table? Who's thinking what, and so on. But
I mean, yeah, and that's actually, I think, a really good model for what we mean when we say traceability too, because a lot of people, even to this day, and rightfully so, argue that, we don't really understand what's going on inside LLMs or any sort of large, deep neural network. And that's absolutely true. But what we found is that by not having the agent sort of communicating mind to mind, because that would be very difficult and technically challenging, we have to use English or whatever language it is conversing in. And that has some benefits for traceability, not only because it is de facto human readable, but even if in the same way of, we have all had coworkers we don't, let's say, get along with. And despite that, collectively at the level of the group, the company, the organization, you still cooperate because you have to, but you do still cooperate. And even if you think that, uh, someone from the other department is a lying, two-faced person who can't be trusted, when you are actually sending like memos across the office or instructions or orders or whatever it is, that is what matters. The intent doesn't necessarily matter. Now, you can get misalignment within the system. That's a larger topic, but it's much harder to sort of propagate misalignment without some trace of sort of deception, because the agents don't know each other's mental state. They don't know what the intent is, only what the instructions are, and those are human readable.
Very helpful. So,
Yeah,
Jay, can
well-
you physically move closer to the mic by chance?
yes, I can.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry.
That's
Well,
okay.
Why don't we just open it the floor to questions?
Ye-
And
yeah.
I'm sure that'll take us in an interesting direction. So, would anybody like to lead off?
Question, if you connect to your phone, you pass it around, talk,
That's.
That's a great idea.
hey, look at me.
Yeah, okay, that's good. Yeah, I
That'd
will
be
do
used.
that. Okay, so. Well, I'm gonna do
Yeah,
that, but
yeah.
why don't we get a question
Yeah.
going and then I'll hook up while we're talking. So, yeah. And yeah, why don't you come up to the laptop? Thanks.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm a law student and I'm just like fascinated about tech law, and I read from your website and just understanding about your business that basically you work with governments and you work with international NGOs and other organizations. So where do you think regulation wise AI is headed? Because we've been hearing regulations and there are ideas and guidances, but where do you think we are headed? What is it that the government or the lawmakers are sort of scared of or apprehensive about? And where do we see the next 5 years as far as AI regulation and, law is concerned? So,
Okay,
yeah.
that's a great question. Tyler,
Richard, you muted everything without a backup. I can't hear anyone now. Wait, oh no, there is another Yanda, but can someone speak into that, I suppose?
Yeah,
Yeah.
so what I don't know, can you hear me? Can you hear me off of this?
It's very quiet.
Yeah, the problem is we're getting an echo.
okay.
Yeah.
If I mute the mic here and then you speak into that.
Okay, are we good? Am I heard? Hello? No, I'm not hearing you, Richard. Yeah, now I can hear you.
Okay.
Okay, I think first thought, best thought, I'm sorry, y'all. I think you're just gonna have to come up to the laptop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so do you want the diplomatic answer or do you want the honest answer? I suppose is the first question.
Politely, the honest answer.
Okay, give me a second. Need to gather the mental resources. What are they afraid of? They are afraid of pissing off the people that fund their campaigns. That's what they're afraid of. That's the beginning and the end of most of it. And if you go beyond that, sort of what does AI regulation look like? I think, and I mean, it's not, I didn't randomly stumble upon this. I was looking for this sort of content, but it is still fortuitous that Richard reached out when he did. If you look at the history of SB 1047 in California, you'll see what I believe to be, at this point, the best attempt at a good faith uh, regulation of the AI industry. And it wasn't perfect even in its final form, but critically, there was real talk across different parties, different groups, and different perspectives. And consideration was given not just to the absolute rights of citizens, but also to the open source community and big tech to a degree. And it passed all committees. It was overwhelmingly supported not just by the residents of California, but of many people outside of it as well. And it was killed by Gavin Newsom uh, because everyone in American politics is in somebody's pocket, frankly. And what that actually looks like from like a legal perspective, I think, truthfully, this is a problem that has been sort of created as a boogeyman of like, oh, this is going to be so difficult. How do you even start with this? How do you even begin to do this? And the obvious answer that seems to be emerging, that I'm in great support of, that you see in this bill and things like Control AI's DIP initiative. I can give that, like, I don't necessarily endorse everything that they propose, but I think it's a good starting point. Is you start with the simple things. You start with the basics. How do you make a car safer? Maybe you first stop people from going through the windshield. So don't allow for recursive self-improvement seems like a pretty decent start. I personally believe any sort of truly uncontrollable intelligence would first have to go through a period of intense compute use in order to bootstrap itself, so to speak, to do the recursive self-improvement. And that is something that can be monitored and tracked without having to physically damage every GPU ever produced to allow for like remote termination. I think that's very Big Brother, and I'm not in favor of that. But there are like common sense regulations we can make. Like what would we say about social media, knowing everything we do in 2025, if we could go back to 2008 or 2006, the very early days of it. And a lot of what we would say to do, such as don't let children be on it, don't advertise, do allow targeted advertising to youth, hopefully some better privacy protections after Cambridge Analytica, but collectively society doesn't seem to care that much. None of these things were there were people warning about this back then. There are people who were concerned about this back then, who saw this coming. It's not actually that hard to see how these things will go wrong. It's actually really easy. And just the tension is largely between Silicon Valley and those that stand to make a lot of money and everyone else. And that's sort of the balance of power we're stuck with right now.
Okay. Don, from that,
Do you want to, because the open source thing came up, did you want to ask something about open source? Because there might be some interesting observations.
oh yeah, he's
Oh, sorry.
he's gonna
Sorry,
like
I'm
this.
coming up to the laptop.
No, you're good. I can hear you.
So I think just as a personal thing, I think you're entirely right in the way you classify the problem there.
Thank you.
But I guess one thing we're grappling with is, I guess the bigger question is how AI fits into a system of capitalism. And the way in this room we're trying to grapple with it is by exploring open source AI as a way to improve traceability for, the estimations that come out of a model for scope 3
Mhm.
emissions.
Absolutely.
And we're not a super technical room, so I wonder if you would be willing to talk about open source, just so we could get your thoughts on it.
Yeah, and I don't think any sort of deep technical knowledge is remotely necessary to have an intelligent conversation about these things. I think these are things that primarily exist in the political realm, and regardless of what your burnout 40-year-old cousin says, everything is political. You need to. Like everyone needs to be engaged to some degree. Everyone is engaged to some degree. Everyone who complains about their rent or food prices, it's all political. So I reject the idea that any sort of deep technical knowledge is needed there, as long as you understand broadly sort of the classifications of what could be, is, or might soon be possible. You can discuss that. So as it so happens, I actually wrote a think piece that has never been widely released to Richard and Jay very
I
shortly
love that.
after. Yeah, very
Love that.
shortly after ChatGPT came out and when I first started using it, where I make the argument that capitalism itself is a distributed artificial intelligence or distributed natural intelligence, however you want to say it. Large systems naturally have, through the construction of the rules and incentives, emergent behaviors and objectives that are not shared necessarily or uniquely by any individual of those groups. And my central thesis, and I hold to this day, is that you cannot, in a capitalistic system, build aligned AI. That is a fundamentally It's like saying paint the room blue with this red paint. It fundamentally misunderstands and contradicts the nature of the two things, because, as we are very clearly seeing, any AI that's created by a for-profit entity ultimately is subject to the profit motive, and the profit motive itself is not aligned with human values writ large. Which, again, I don't think I have to justify that to this room, but in other circles, that's heresy. And so, how do I think open source is absolutely, if not the way forward, a significant and necessary aspect of how this emerges in a way that doesn't make life far worse or extinguished, full stop. So my sort of more utopian vision of how this proceeds is that sometime in the not too distant future, so I'm guessing in the next year to 3 years, we hit a limit of. Sorry, I'm going to have to give it a little bit of context. Right now, the most cutting edge models are able to do work that is at least on benchmarks, is comparable to PhD, like highly specialized PhD students. Now, these are just benchmarks, but I assure you that the jump from benchmark to being able to do actual real work is far smaller than a lot of people would have you believe. The fundamental nature of these models that people generally think will prevent them from sort of engaging in these longer form tasks are actually pretty easy to overcome. That's kind of what we do, is we give it the scaffolding to have sort of persistence, to have long-term planning, to have multiple damn tries. You don't ask a developer to write something out in a single go and hand it to you and just expect that this code will work perfectly. That's crazy. So to expect the same of AI is equally foolish and equally unnecessary. So we're rapidly approaching the point where this sort of like PhD level and sort of like expert level work is going to be able to be done. But more importantly, I think for the broader population, is that will mean that a smaller model, something that you can run on every single one of these laptops, ranging from a cutting edge Mac to a Windows laptop, a Lenovo you bought 6 years ago, will be able to run some agent. Not necessarily super fast, not necessarily the top of the line by any means, but able to run some model. And as that line of sort of efficiency comes down and down and down, soon we will be able to do work that is beyond what humans can do in aggregate, or in aggregate, AI will be able to do what an individual human and even an expert, even a world-class Nobel laureate will not be able to do. We are a year out from that at most. And then once you get there, what percentage of useful human work requires a Nobel laureate? Very little. Now, that percentage will change because if we can have a data center of geniuses, that's probably good for science, if it's regulated and working on problems that actually benefit people. So I think that the demand for this sort of high level expert model reasoning will grow. But for most people, you don't need that. You really don't. There's a limit to what we can call useful intelligence. And as what is sort of maximal useful intelligence that you need for a task is able to be packed into a smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller model, you'll start to be able to run systems of these things locally. And soon you'll be able to run systems of these things locally on models that you've custom trained and fine-tuned for whatever purposes you want, for any myriad of purposes you want. And at that point, my hope is that while the big, scary data center AI will still exist, for the vast majority of people and uses of AI, they will efficiency themselves out of a moat. OpenAI, Anthropic, all the apologies. All these big companies, in their efforts to race to the bottom of price, of speed, of whatever, will essentially remove the only actual moat they have, which is their compute. When it hits a certain threshold of usefulness for sort of unit of compute used, then your laptop will be sufficient for what you need to generally use it for. And it is my hope that that will be the real transformation of AI, that a billion agents running on mostly sort of edge hardware, as we'd call it, is going to be the thrust of the transformative impact of AI, and it will be definitionally in the hands of each individual user.
So, as you can imagine, it's incredibly hard to speak after Tyler.
Sorry, it's because I go on so long.
No, this is why I love you. I can add more color. How I think this is gonna play out mentally, but that's the answer for how this is progressing, and specifically to open source. The day that DeepSeek released its model, the entire world changed. People don't see it, people don't know it, but up until that point, there were really 3 or 4 players who were saying, listen, you're all cute, but like, this is a game that if you want to play, you need to bring billions of dollars worth of hardware to the table and spend years training. And oh, by the way, we're buying all the hardware that's being produced, so you can't even if you want to. And then DeepSeek was produced for, I think it was something like $6 million or around there. And it, and here you go. And it destabilized the whole paradigm overnight. And that's just going to keep going because you can't put that back in the box because definitionally it's free to anyone.
May I follow up? Tyler, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, I just want to follow up Kate's question to be as specific as I can make it to what the group is working on. Tyler, they're developing a proposal that if we're going to have something like AI use for reporting of scope 3 emissions and carbon emissions generally,
Mhm.
that we will need to have a context that favors an open source solution and one that can be used in effect to produce a kind of de facto interoperable standard for companies reporting on their emissions. I hope that's a fair characterization.
Mhm.
Do you think that's, you know, a reasonable direction to think along the lines of?
No, I think it's the only direction to like. There's no. If this isn't open source, it's fighting itself every step of the way. It will die in the cradle. Like absolutely, this should and must be open source. And I think that the more, oh God, I sound like such a businessman. The more value you can bring to the to people who will use it in actually like making their lives easier rather than harder, which all respect and love, obviously, to Maiko, but I think that was sort of a critical issue that it ran into is that initial hurdle of getting people to engage with and use it. With companies, it's actually a little easier because you know what their incentives are. And so if you can actually make it something they want to and are benefited by using, which actually a legal problem. That's not a technical problem because what you need to do is, and deliberately or not, it's been done. If you make the burden of regulation so much that my dad works in logistics. I actually just asked him about sort of like, is he familiar with Scope 3? What is his relationship with it? And he says that he has a group in his company responsible for emissions, including Scope 3. He has a group, he has a whole department dedicated to this. And that's not bad, but obviously, like, that's that they have jobs because of regulation. Now, this isn't like some pro-bureaucracy rent-seeking pitch, but if it's at least hard enough that it can, you know, make these people's lives easier in their work and make it more accurate and more effective, then sort of the law creates a problem. Really, the law is really making companies actually accountable for the problems that they cause. I think we're all on the same page there. But then tech can be the solution to the legal, quote, problem that has been given. And I actually see that this is a very common and beneficial interaction of law and tech writ large. And I think it's sort of the job of the law to create problems in some ways. Like, it's sort of a very pessimistic way of looking at it, but a bad way of it sounds mean, but you know, laws that prevent Facebook from tracking your every move and or you know, the European data privacy laws, they create problems for companies, and that's a good thing. Like they create problems for companies in favor of the people, and then tech can come along in some ways, in this way specifically with Scope 3, to address them in a way that just sort of make sure that the money is going to be there to actually, like, if Scope 3, if the emission standards didn't exist, you would have no reason to build an AI that tracks emission standards because no company would fund it because no company would care. And the law creates the incentive and the burden, and it incentivizes the resource distribution to say, yeah, we should use this system. We should actually track this. We should try to get better and make it easier to track these things. The law helps.
So,
Yeah.
gotta, pausing for one second. It's actually funny that we're talking about this because one of the things that I'm trying to build right now applies to this is that exact problem. A bit of background that I didn't provide. Something else that I do is that I'm the executive director for Canada's hub for non-financial capital. And one of the problems that you can imagine is Scope 3 emissions and how impossible it is to extract. Because it's great for large enterprises that have to report all the way down the supply chain, but because most players in every supply chain or small businesses or even people, they aren't tracking anything because they don't have the time, they don't have the knowledge. And right now, this standard they don't even apply to businesses below 500 employees because they can't. They are huge. They require a team of people to actually report on. But the other issue is there are so many standards, and they all require. They all have overlap, but not complete. Maybe 40%, maybe 60%. So one of the things we're trying to do now is build a system to take every single standard, compare it, map it, then have companies be able to just put in the information they have, and it'll tell them, okay, for standard X, you are missing question A, B, C, F, and D. Here's how you go about completing it. And I really do believe that technologically this is not a problem to do, and it is fundamentally required, and AI is going to be a part of it, but AI can be transparent, and actually, quite frankly, we all know that most of these reports are painted green anyways, and AI can be trained and have particular experts whose job is to strip out all of the greenwashing and have reports produced that are actually as objective as they can be.
There are other questions? Maybe I'll jump in, and I hope this will generate other questions. But Tyler, one of the things the group has struggled with here is how to keep track also of the impact of AI itself, which includes the server farms, the water impacts, the rare earth metals, all of the impacts of the compute, so to speak. What's your perspective on how that is best to be done? And is it possible, for example, I'll just make it a very pointed question, is it possible for innovation to keep track of that itself as it provides solutions to people?
So it would be this is actually one of those things where I am not what you would traditionally call a techno optimist. I don't think that Um, in a vacuum where politics isn't counted, I don't think tech will just automatically do good things for humanity. I think there needs to be intention and like direction and guidance. But there are certain problems that I do believe the natural arc of technology will cause to lessen over time significantly. So with regards to the rare earth metals specifically, not so much the energy use, I think that we are there's been a lot of effort over the last 20 and especially the last like 5 to 10 years towards paradigms of compute that are less sort of like cobalt, gold, nickel, like reliant. And so things like optical computing, uh, sand mining is going to become, especially like pure quartz mining, is going to become a big friggin' deal. When you no longer need metal, but instead you are actually turning rocks into brains, basically, by using high purity silicon and quartz to create these sort of optical chips. The energy savings there, we don't need room temperature superconductors. We like light is quite the powerhouse compared to electricity. So I do think certain aspects of it will lessen over time. That said, not in a vacuum. In the real world, I think compute is actually going to be one of the easiest things to track the emissions of, even full life cycle, for the simple fact that the difference between um a sort of like your local, well, yeah, for you guys, I guess your local supercomputer, the supercomputers that exist at McGill, which by any definition circa, you know, 2010, they're supercomputers. Are no different fundamentally from what OpenAI or Google or Anthropic would use, except for scale. Like the sort of irony of the complexity of what they're producing is the inputs are actually extremely simple. Now they obviously go through this extremely complicated semiconductor manufacturing process, but that doesn't change what they're made out of. And even there, the complexity is not input output. It's the etching and the art and science of all that. So like the raw inputs and outputs for the AI industry are blessedly very, very, very simple compared to a lot of other industries. It's so much easier, it turns out somehow, from a materials perspective to, or like an input output perspective, to build a supercomputer than it is to build a car, because there's just so many fewer different types of parts you need. You need you need a handful of parts, most of which are made out of very similar materials, and you scale it up, 7 orders of magnitude.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have much to add to that, but I've been around the conversation of tracking emissions since 2010. And this is actually one of the easier industries to do because it's built, it's put in place, it doesn't move, and then it's like you can track all of that production. The use of the thing is just how much power it uses, and if it has to be cool, then great. Not actually that hard.
Yeah.
So
Sorry, sorry. I made a slight realization. The scope 3 emissions for a data center, at least in terms of like what are the big line items, you could make the argument. I don't know how true this would be when you actually like really dig into it. You could make the argument it's simpler than an average household, because really the inputs, especially once it's all sort of built, is electricity and water. That's it. Even a household has gas and food and medicine and things like that.
Does anybody else have another question? Come on.
Okay, please, please.
Please.
Sorry.
That's okay.
This is maybe a question for Jay, but one thing that we're thinking of proposing is making more explicit in the scope 3, you know, like the 15 categories of things you have to
Mhm.
track. Adding a 16th that
Okay.
says specifically emissions from compute.
Yep.
Just to make it so it's not something you have to pull out of the categories, it's
Yeah.
something that's just there.
Yeah.
I
Do you-
think that's a fantastic idea. That's a fantastic idea.
I think, and I think that is going to happen. But, you know, in the next 5 years, any of that, I guarantee you that is a thing. Please do that. Because that's easy for companies to do. Again, bigger companies, when you're asking the bakery run by 2 people work up at 4 in to start the bake cycle by 5, to start tracking the output of their laptop, the point of sale machine, etc. When they frankly usually aren't, they may have enough money in the bank the last month if things go wrong, not really something they're thinking about. That said, my biggest thing over the past 10 years has been all of the data, most of it, already exists. It's already in Hydrovex Poroids. Just connect the accounts. You can automate this. I mean, it's harder to do for the people picking fruit in Zambia, but here,
I'm gonna follow up with a question I hope is also relevant to the group. Is there a reason, in your view, gentlemen, why a multi-agent platform would be the place to look for, or to develop rather, the kind of open source, solution where they've been talking about as regards, not just scope 3 emissions, frankly, but providing, proper disclosure of carbon emissions across an organization? Is there a reason to believe that this would be better accomplished through a multi-agent model, or are LLMs, enough for that purpose?
let me take this for a minute and then Tyler can follow him.
Go for it.
Now, you don't, as a company, you don't want to be giving your corporate data to open corporate models. You don't have any proof that they aren't actually using it. So that's a huge issue until private models are actually a thing. You aren't going to see a ton of this. To answer your question, yes, for the explicit reason that if you were giving a complex legal file to be handled and you needed it handled properly, would you hand it to a single lawyer or to a law firm that had as many lawyers as was needed to handle every single aspect of it properly? That
Right. Could you sketch briefly how, because you know a lot about scope 3 emissions and so on,
right.
like how you would divide up the expertise, maybe with an illustration needed to be able to parcel this out? I don't know.
I mean,
Yeah.
yes, I can very briefly, but I haven't actually looked at the scope 3 requirements in a bit, so this is gonna be wrong.
Right.
That's a lot. Hold on a second. I'll just put that off. It on for so we begin in 5 seconds. Actually, Tyler, can I pass down to you
All right, but I can't promise that I'm going to be running it along the same line. I might, dig
Okay.
left and run across into the stands.
Fair enough.
So to my understanding of scope 3, that is specifically the stuff that you are not directly, like definitionally not directly responsible for, right? Like that's what that is.
Yeah.
And it's not even your indirect, it's the things above and below you, right? Like, again, correct?
Yes.
So the way I see it, naively, I literally like was talking to Claude about like the definitions and realities of scope 3 this morning. So grain of salt to be sure. But the way I see it is that's a horrendously inefficient way to try and collect information and sort of yeah, well, actually, that's the end of that sentence. But obviously, the thing you get out from that, the thing you get in exchange for that complete lack of efficiency of trying to track things that you explicitly do not have direct control over, is you're not incentivized to have that number be, or not as incentivized to have that number be something that it isn't. And also, everyone has an above and a below. Well, most things have an above and a below, and everything has at least one. So I see it sort of as like these or not concentric rings, but like every point along the supply chain is concerned with every other point that isn't themselves. And if you can bring AI in there to overcome the vast inefficiency of that, then it's from a game theory perspective, fantastic. It's absolutely, if not just the right way, maybe the only way to do it, is mutual checks and balances. Now, obviously, mutual checks and balances are not absolute. Just look at America, but they are better than not having them. And I honestly believe that one of the main reasons I don't sort of stay up at night worrying about AI creating a bioweapon and murdering everybody is explicitly because I don't think that there's going to be a singular superintelligence that exists as a monolith, or even just like a strong general intelligence, however you break those definitions up in your mind, that is alone in the world. I think that the most natural progression for this, and it's sort of in line with an open source view, is many agents and many different multi-agent systems, all with different incentives and alignments and goals that aren't all sort of pointed in the same direction. They all have different, like they keep each other in check in the same way people and companies in theory should.
So, thank you. So, I just to paint a picture here. You are a large company and you are required to report on the supply chain of this fault. Every producer of anything that went into that final product is sending you by contract because you require them to do, or they aren't being paid. They send you the data on water use, on electricity use, on force, etc. They always send it in different forms. They make you different units of measurement. So if you have a system, one agent cleans the data and puts it in whatever form you need it. Or that agent is trained to understand both what's coming in, but what's expected down the line and what. That will give it the ability to flag something to the user if a point of data doesn't make sense for the next step. So that would be one agent. the next takes that data and puts it into whatever form field you are responsible for reporting on, and make sure that that part of the form still makes sense after it's been put in. So on and so on and so on. I could go on, but that's the general idea.
Any last questions or observations? Fantastic. Any parting thoughts, gentlemen? Things that this group should think about?
Yeah. So technology and law and governance have always had this interesting relationship where up until you tell me, but up until 20 years ago, progress was moving slow enough that legislation had the time to be put in place and be impactful for a time before it had to be modified. Then we started moving into the concept of real-time law, which basically says that like tax moving too quickly to be efficiently legislated. By the time passes through all this and gets by all the people who are in people's pockets and run delay and squash it. Even if you mix it into law, it's not applicable for the most part because it moves faster already. There's a lot of fear around AI being part of the process of making law. I'm actually not scared of that at all. I think that is a fundamentally required part of the next 20 years. And the reason I say that is because there is no other way to process this quickly enough to make it relevant. And if you can build this system so that every aspect of the process is transparent to everybody, I don't see the issue with moving quicker as long as people are actually going to read what comes out the other end. Because, and that is a human decision. And humans are very, very bad at doing things they don't like to do, especially if they take time away from things they do.
Rude.
True. And I think as a parting thought from me that this is the issue we have to grapple with, is how hard do we actually want to work for our own transparency? It can be transparent, but you gotta do something with it. You have to actually read it and actually process it and take decisions on that. Most people aren't going to do that. And that's the issue. Tyler, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I'm gonna be myself about this and give a bit more of an AI-centric view. I don't disagree with anything Jay said, by the way. I just think it's been said and I agree, and now I'm gonna say something different. In a lot of ways, in many ways, AI is very much like every other technology that came before, because it and the same arguments about regulation and innovation and sort of its place in the wider world have, we I was about to say we're all old enough. I don't know if that's true. many of the people in this room are old enough to at least remember the early days of social media and sort of the progress that took, and the internet before it even. I mean, that's definitely not true, but however, AI is different in one fundamental way, and that is that it is the first technology that is not strictly a tool. It is an agent. It can make decisions autonomously and at scale. Now, it's not the first tool that could make decisions, but it's the first technology we've developed that has the potential, especially sort of on quote longer time horizons of like 2 to 5 years, of just going fully autonomous and not needing any human input. And I think critically, the thing that just needs to be kept in mind as you dig deeper into this is that in most cases it's very similar, but this is a critical, fundamental, and important difference, that it can make decisions on its own. And there are places where it should. There are places where it must eventually. I mean, just based on my understanding of the field, which is significant, I think it'll probably be maybe 2 to 5 years before I will be getting second opinions for medical decisions from AI. In addition to a human. And that can extend further. And I think as legal scholars, it's important for you to consider the ramifications of what happens when our tools don't need us.
Wonderful. Tyler, thank you so much, Jay.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for your precious time, and I look forward myself to further discussions with you. If anything comes forward from the group, I will share that with you as well.
Yeah, and feel free to share my my email with people. I know
Great.
certainly I've been in enough of these seminar courses to understand that there are some people who are very eager to ask questions. That was me when in my courses. Silence makes me uncomfortable when everyone else is just staring around. But there are many people who just feel more comfortable talking in private, or didn't have a question now, but will when they've thought about it. And all I do is think about this stuff. So I'm always happy to engage and have a conversation with people who are similarly interested and want to have a dialogue.
You're wonderful. Thanks so much.
Thank you,
Okay.
John.
Thank you.
See you all. Bye.
Thank you.